Anyway, I enrolled in this Pfizer study, and they took some initial blood work to baseline to make sure I was not COVID positive. And then I took a shot, had some initial sensation, a little bit of fatigue, but that could have been related to my change in the workout regimen. And then I think a month or two later, I took another shot per protocol. And again, they told me the symptoms I experienced, I would still experience them again. And I've been keeping a monthly, actually initially when you get the initial dose, you keep a daily diary where you mention your symptoms, and if you have any symptoms, then you report the symptoms. And of course the diary is an electronic diary, so if you have any complications, then they, because at that point you don't know whether you have the placebo or the active. So for that reason, whenever they would have any entry on the diary, because I remember one time I accidentally put in that I had some symptoms, but it wasn't that I had the symptoms. I guess I misanswered one of the questions. So they were very responsive. She called me right away that evening and asked, am I okay? And I said, oh, actually no. This thing populated on my electronic diary, and we resolved the issue. But anyway, so they're very responsive. If something was to happen medically, then they are quick to respond to make sure whether you need some additional medical attention. So from the daily monitoring, then you go into the weekly monitoring in the diary, which I did not carry. I hope they don't need it because I'm on my way to the clinical site now. From the daily, you go into weekly, and this is going to be an ongoing entry for a while. I mean, even with most drugs that go through post-market approvals, you do have post-market analyses that are done just to make sure the safety is still prolonged over the duration of time. So it's been good so far. Like I said, I have not had any negative impact on my normal day-to-day activities. My working out, my work ethic is fine. Eating habits are fine. So I wish I had the protocol to share with you. But I was considering flying overseas to see my family, as I have been trying to do over the Christmas holidays, but because of the political environment and also the travel restrictions, it wasn't as feasible for me to travel this year. But in anticipation of doing so, I decided, let me go ahead and get a letter from the clinical site just stating that I am going through the trial. That way, if at the very minute chance that I did decide to travel overseas, that I would have documentation to show that I'm enrolled in the clinical trial, and I'll try and show that to you, that I'm enrolled in the clinical trial. Just for safety reasons. But what was interesting was this past weekend, which I think will be a difficult and interesting challenge coming up front on the back end of this. This past weekend, I encountered what people are nowadays calling a Karen. I was at a store, and they were, of course, asking for people to wear masks, and I usually respectfully wear masks, because I keep that part of my, I keep my private life somewhat private. So when it comes down to the vaccination, and I'm only doing this now because I feel like people are very, very well getting information from the wrong places, and every time I watch the news media, the news outlets, they are just projecting a lot of information that is not accurate. So I felt the need to, as someone that's been on the Pfizer clinical trial, to make a mention of some of the truths that do exist, or at least some of my truths that do exist based on my experience with having been in a close proximity to this bubble of information related to the pandemic. So first of all, there are no chips being installed in people. Get that through your skull. No one's trying to monitor your business. Matter of fact, there's nothing that you're doing that's that important that the government wants to really follow you. So just get that through your mind. But also from a safety and efficacy standpoint, before these clinical trials do take place, they've been evaluated and assessed to make sure that they are safe for the public and the masses to be administered. And also another thing is these different strains, this is part of human beings. You have a genetic makeup, you have organisms that, when you look at the genetic makeup, part of being a scientist is you build onto this database where you can, instead of starting from scratch and reinventing the wheel, these databases exist to where if you come up with something that has somewhat of a genetic makeup or genetic framework that is similar, you build upon that knowledge, kind of like a flu vaccine. When you get into the flu vaccine this year, the following year might have a different strain of the influenza virus. That doesn't mean the scientists go to ground zero and start saying, oh damn, we have a new vaccine strain, we have a new strain, we need a new vaccine. No, they build upon the knowledge that they have acquired over the years. Same as with SARS, so for the people that say, oh, this is too soon, maybe it's too soon because it's getting the headlines based on the fact that this just happened on the onset of 2020. But there is science surrounding this microorganism. There is science surrounding genetic makeup. So it's all about building upon science. So back to the safety, back to the efficacy of the potential efficacy of this vaccine. When you build it upon information that's currently out there and optimize and tweak and just still come up with creative processes of making a robust vaccine, you still have to test these against models. You test them against, for some of you vain people, it's not models like Vogue and that kind of, there are clinical models and non-clinical models. And I hate to say this, I don't know if this was done with this, but you go from in vitro testing, in vivo analysis, and then you get into approvals, and even those animal tests, there are regulations as to how the animal tests and animal studies are conducted. You just don't get a bunch of rabbits from the street and a bunch of dogs. There are models that are, it just is a very interesting conversation when I hear what nonsense people come up with as to how you're injecting this in humans without assessing other, whatever the case may be. Before any approvals get given, there have been safety type assessments done, be it from historical data, literature reviews, white papers written, to actually, assessing animal models to see if safety-wise it makes sense. See if efficacy-wise you have a PD model that makes sense, a pharmacodynamic model that makes sense. So between that and where we are today, where I'm part of the Pfizer clinical trial, there are so many unanswered questions, but I go back to the Karen that I ran into this past weekend that was like, oh, you need to wear a mask, and was mandating that everyone wear a mask. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, I just recently got the vaccine a couple of months ago. It's none of your business. But if you have anything to say to anyone regarding anything, and this applies to any store in general, do not direct your half-baked information directly to a customer. That's why you have managers. That's why you have supervisors. Reach out to the store's manager, supervisor. Let them know what your issue is, and have them deal with your concerns. But this is how I feel issues get blown completely to a different level than they were supposed to. I for sure once this gentleman and his wife, who was clearly trying to get the husband to shut up and just pay for what they came to the store to pay for and just keep it moving. He beckons the manager eventually after speaking to me and saying, hey, wear your mask. And like I said, I usually wear my mask. This was just a quick thing. The store called, said that my items had been delivered. Again, so the guy was aggravated by other things, but then he just says, because in his mind he thinks every store must have everyone wear a mask, which I guess makes sense, but it's not a law. And again, it was a very different circumstance. I was vaccinated. He doesn't know that. He doesn't need to know that. But this is how confrontations happen. So I continued to give the family space. He went to the front, spoke to the manager, and I could hear that he was talking about, but the people behind in queue behind me were also making a comment about the gentleman and his behavior and saying people shouldn't talk to other people at the store like this because you don't know not that people should be worried about who's carrying weapons, but you just don't know what is going on. You don't know people's personal stuff. You don't know that I have my protection from the inside out. You don't know this, you don't know that. So please keep your extra negative energy that you got from the world out there, keep it to yourself and follow the proper channels and speak to a manager and whatever needs to be done. I actually followed suit because he and his family paid for the items they were buying. And I pulled the manager aside and I said, hey, did he make a comment about the store mandating that people wear masks and that the manager should let me know to wear a mask and should... But the couple behind me were also saying that clearly he knows the kinds of people to talk to, because if he would have talked to me this way, then stuff would have gone sideways. Again, I'm not aggressive in that sense where I start fights in stores, but I can see how this would have escalated, because why are you talking to me? You're there with your family. That's your primary focus of safety. If whatever safety issue you think you have, move your family forward. So I go to the manager and I said, hey, look, not to put my business out there, but I showed him the letter that I had from the clinical trial and said, look, he should not be talking to me first of all. His wife is clearly bothered by the fact that he's creating a scene or attempting to create a scene, and luckily there was nothing going on here. You come at me and I just retreat, and just it's not the time or the place. You clearly have other things going on. The political environment is really showing different levels of where people are mentally, and and maybe that's part of why he was a little bit aggravated. I don't know. I don't care. Bottom line is follow proper protocol. Don't speak to customers unnecessarily, because if something were to happen at the store, do you think the store would take liability for your misbehavior? All I told the manager was, and the manager, as soon as I approached him to say, hey, did the guy mention anything about, and he said, don't worry about it. And I said, no. I'm not worried about it. I just need you to let customers know if they have an issue, they need to speak to you. And if you need to say something to the customers, you feel, but he said, I didn't need to say anything to you. The store doesn't mandate anything, blah, 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 blah. He wanted me to come and tell you to do. And I said, that's fine, but he doesn't know certain things about what I just described over this feed. So, and his wife was just, I feel bad for the spouses of these Karens, and I hate to call a male Karen a Karen. I think they should come up with a different name if they don't already. I don't keep too much attention to social media in that sense. Anyway, I will jump from that and say that for the past couple of months I've felt fine. I'm on my way to the clinic now. So Pfizer has made some modifications to their clinical protocol, because in the beginning, when I asked, so if you have a placebo, would you be able to now, at some point, get the vaccine because you're part of this trial that's helping essentially the globe, right? And I think it's only fair that if you're helping the cause and if you took a risk. For myself, because I was familiar with how clinical trials work in my line of what I do, and I assessed the risk, and the monetary value could not even come anywhere close to anything that makes sense for me to enroll in a trial. And honestly, I think if I can be as transparent as possible, they do give you, every visit they give you, they put a dollar amount on a card, a Visa card. Honestly, I haven't even used that card all those times that I've gone in. It's because, well, one, I forget that it's in there. Two, that was not my motivation. My motivation was, in a grand scheme of a lot of other things, just to be more impactful in, those are hella loud, sorry, it's raining. To be more impactful in stuff in general, on a broader scheme, and I thought that this would be a good contribution alongside all the humanitarian and whatever. So Pfizer made some recent modifications based on an email that I received last night, which indicates that the changes to the protocol will include a move, I forget what they called it, a transition of the population that were administered a placebo. They're giving you the opportunity to actually get transitions to get the actual COVID vaccine, which I think is not only a noble thing, but I think it's just the responsible thing to do, because again, some people are taking a risk, and then for them on the back end to realize that they were part of a placebo subgroup and then find out that they cannot also receive the drug, I think it would be unfortunate. So I'm glad that Pfizer made that modification. And the other thing was what? Oh, the only thing about that is they are prioritizing who will get, even from the placebo group, who will get the actual vaccine. So for myself, they're recommending that when you go back for the 4th visit, I think I'm on my 3rd visit. So initially you have several visits, and then you have, I think my 4th visit is scheduled for February of 2020, where they get your blood work, and I don't know what that fourth visit is about, but it's really an ongoing thing. These clinical trials will be ongoing for a while, from when you initiate. So, yeah, you have the opportunity to change and move from the placebo group to the active group, but they were prioritizing healthcare workers and people who are on the front lines to make that transition. So in essence, I'm going to the clinical site now to be officially unblinded, unmasked. It's funny, so I'm in the field of ophthalmics, so it's frowned upon when you talk about unblinded, because you're actually dealing with the eye, and clinical trials to do with the eye. It's preferred that you use unmasked. So I'm going in to be unmasked, but because this is not an ocular delivery or an ocular delivered vaccine, I can use comfortably unblinded. So they scheduled me. She called me. I think the director of the program called me today and asked if I'm available to go in. Actually, this was in response to my phone call. Once I got the email, I asked, hey, can I come and be unblinded so I can find out for sure what I was administered with. So I'm about to officially do that now, as soon as I get to the clinic. Just wanted to make a little blog or video of sorts of that journey. But it's been incredible. I mean, again, if anything, this whole vaccine, this whole COVID era of 2020 has really, if anything else, resonated a lot of things for the masses, not just myself, just for the masses, and just things we need to focus on. I've always told people around me, my mom in particular, because she has respiratory challenges with asthma, and she's in a certain tier of her age bracket. Oh, did not mean to show you skin. In a certain tier of her age bracket, I think she's approaching 70, and she has severe asthma as well. So, she and I were talking today, and she was telling me some of the concerns of people saying that they're not going to be vaccinated. My thing is, if you have the information, the right information, and you choose not to be vaccinated, hey, that's fine. It's up to you. Your decisions, no one's forcing you to do anything. But I recommended to my mother and said, look, I've been part of this trial. If there's anyone that you can rely on as far as getting as accurate information as possible, I'm not saying that I know everything 100%, but I am saying that the media outlets, I have rolled my eyes so many times when I listen to these well-renowned reporters, and even these physicians, doctors that go out there putting out these messages, unfounded messages, to say the least. This is what gives the general population, a really hard time making a decision as to whether this is the right thing for them to do. Sorry, I feel like I'm all over the place because the current situation was supposed to raise another issue. Once people have been vaccinated, this is where I was going with that. It was not about, even though that was a ridiculous occurrence over the past weekend, where I was going with this was, once you get vaccinated, how now do you in the public prove that you have been vaccinated? What documents do you carry? How do you show that you are good in the masses? Because the idea is to have people go back into their normalcy of day-to-day activities without necessarily being overly skeptical about life in general, because now there is somewhat of an end to a pandemic and its associated behaviors. So, do you carry a document? And then that document, how legit is it? Because you know that there are some people who are all about fakery and forgery of documents. So how do you know the documents are legit? Just like your driver's license, those you can scan them and see that they're legit. Your passports, you can scan those and see if they're legit. Maybe that's what they need to do, is put a stamp at the back of your driver's license. Who knows? Patent that someone. Patent a legal document that is, modifiable to have or to include that aspect, because someone has to carry their driver's license everywhere. And much as you can fake a driver's license, I've heard, there are ways to detect what's a fraud and what's not. So that's going to be another challenge, but for right now the challenge is just making sure people get the right information to guide their processes. So I'll try to keep information available based on my journey. Again, if people choose to make different decisions and determinations based on the wrong information, they were going to do that anyway. Outside of this pandemic, they probably do that anyway in their day-to-day lives. So this is not for them. This is for those who are really truly seeking, information that can help them make some critical family decisions to guide those processes. Right? So stay tuned. I'll try to follow up with information as I gather it. I did reach out to the clinic sometime, maybe 2 weeks ago, to find out from all the blood work, because of the scientific background I have in my training. Of course, I was curious about, what were my baseline blood work findings, and then from the next time that I went in, what were those blood work results. But I don't think Pfizer will release those till sometime later on. So for right now, short of you doing that yourself, which I will end up probably doing, is not baselining, but continuing to get my own results. That way I can keep track of what's going on in my body. But overall, all is well. Safety. I hope this has been a great year of reflection for most. I hope the lessons learned as far as family values, as far as self-values, particularly self-values, I hope those continue whether or not COVID and its associated complexities get resolved. I really hope that carries forward into people's livelihood as a whole. It's beneficial. Unfortunate for those who have lost jobs, lost family members through this, but absolutely I think for those that have been able to get through the initial series of months in 2020 that have been very difficult. For those that have gone through that, my thing is just keep at it, stay focused, keep motivated. Things will get better. This is, for some, this was a much needed push restart. For others, this was a situation that confirms certain things about where you need to be in your mental space. To some, this was just a state of confusion. So for all, I hope that they all continue to channel towards being a better society that tries to do the best within what they can control.